Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. It is very cold over the next day or two, but it is turning slightly milder as we head towards the end of the week into the weekend. Still remaining below average and still pretty cold, especially in the south, where we are likely to see that colder air get really trapped at the surface. So many areas are going to see frosts night on night, and then as we head towards the end of the weekend into the start of next week, the floodgates could open to proper cold, bitterly cold northerly winds, and the risk of snow substantially increases. Leading up to that though, not looking at anything wintry at all, and very few showers in general. Maybe a few in the north and northeast coming in off the North Sea, but nothing substantial at all. We'll also have a look at some of the other precipitation charts. We'll look at the GM and the ECMWF today, as they are some very interesting charts developing. The risk of significant snow is looking really possible. And then we'll have a look at some of the longer range, looking at the GFS, GM, ECMWF pressure charts. And then we'll have a look at the MOGREP, something we don't normally have a look at, but that is the Met Office ensembles. And we'll have a look at the GFS and ECMWF ensembles as well, because we do have a lot of uncertainty into next week. We're seeing conditions vary from blizzards and widespread cold and snow to cold in the north, snow in the north, but milder, wet and windy further southwards. So kind of anything between that is looking possible at this stage, and we'll start trying to distinguish what is the most likely scenario as we progress into next week. But I definitely would, before we get into the video, I definitely would say that it is favouring that cold and potentially snowy route at the moment. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well. The link's in the description. Now, if you start out on the live radar at 6 PM, and you can see it is cold outside, but very few showers. It has been a pretty freezing cold day. Temperatures have been close to freezing in many areas, but most areas have nudged around the 1 or 2 degree mark. But the wind chill has been bitter, making it feel like around -4 to -6 in many areas. So it's the coldest conditions we've had in numerous weeks, perhaps even colder, especially though you feel like temperatures than what we saw at the end of November, where we did see wintry conditions. So yeah, bitterly cold outside, and it's all because of this very dry, very cold air coming in off the continent. But of course, coming in off the continent, very low dew points, makes it feel cold, but very little precipitation. Of course, we saw the showers yesterday, the snow showers yesterday. Many areas saw a scattering of showers, and even some areas saw some light accumulations. But as I said, over the next 5 days, we're not expecting much. A few showers across parts of northern and eastern areas. You can already see for Scotland, it's a little bit more marginal because we have got milder air wrapping in around the higher pressure. But at the surface, it is still going to remain chilly, even when this milder air does move in aloft. If you look at the temperatures, you can see it is freezing outside. Temperatures widely down towards 0 or below that as we do progress over the coming hours. Most areas, the lighter blues, which is 0 degrees or less. And you can see how, yes, it is very cold across the UK, but having us as an island really does hold those temperatures up, as you can see across parts of Europe, where very little access to warmer seas, those temperatures are plummeting even further parts of Central and Eastern Europe, down towards -10 to -15 quite widely. Now, if you have a look at the latest UKV and see what that is showing, you can see it is very dry over the coming days. We can skip through the precipitation chart pretty quickly. As you can see, there are a few odd showers here or there, but it is generally dry. And the best thing to look at for the precipitation chart is the direction of the cloud movement, as that shows you where the wind direction is coming from. It is slowly veering more northerly, but generally is just milder air coming round the high pressure system. But as we head into the weekend, the northerly gets stronger. Bit of rain moving in there. That's the divider between the milder air under the higher pressure and cooler air coming in from the north. And then as we head into Sunday, you can see more showers and more an extensive band of showers there. And that is symbolising the very cold air starting to arrive. We see that in the upper air temperatures, milder air to the south, a little bit of cooler air to the north, and then the very cold air just off the coast of northern Scotland there. That is slowly moving in, and will be moving in for rule as we head in towards Monday. And then we see the risk of low pressure clashing with that very cold air. And if you do look at the max temperatures, you'll be able to see that Overnight, today, temperatures hardly got above freezing in some areas, but even the best areas, maybe 3 or 4 degrees, feeling below freezing. Overnight temperatures widely down towards freezing, if not below freezing. Again, -2, -3, -4 degrees is possible. Into Wednesday, still cold, but maybe slightly higher, maybe by a degree or two, but still feeling below freezing in many areas. Overnight into Thursday, a frost in the south, but further north it's a bit more cloud around, and we've got that milder upper air temperatures moving in, which will mean those surface temperatures don't quite fall away as much. Thursday afternoon still cold, but maybe more around 4 to 7 degrees with that milder air drifting in, and Friday frostier further north, and then again 5, 6 or 7 degrees. Saturday again, frosty in areas. Again, I wouldn't take the areas where we see these really cold temperatures too literally, as that does depend on clearer skies, which again can change at very short notice depending on cloud formations. And then as we head into Saturday, look at that, slowly descending further, 2, 3, 4 degrees, maybe 5 or 6 at best, and then cooling further into Sunday and Monday as that really cold air starts to arrive. The one thing I will note about this is that, yes, next week there could be marginal snow events around. That is looking like a real possibility, especially further southwards. But having a full week prior to this cold and potentially snowy spell, where the ground is going to get absolutely frozen solid, the surface temperatures at 2 meters are going to be very cold, and you can see that's shown by the upper air temperatures rising here, but not affecting the surface temperatures too much. It will mean that if we see marginal snow events at the upper air level at the surface, it is looking pretty well conditioned for snow to fall and for snow to accumulate. That is something we do need to take into account, because sometimes we can see marginal snow events where the lead up to it has been fairly mild, surface temperatures are well above freezing, and it does mean that the impacts of any marginal snow event, if it did start to fall as snow and did accumulate, would be less, because accumulations would be more slushy or wouldn't accumulate at all. But next week, because the surface temperatures are so cold and the lead up to this potentially wintry spell is so cold, it will mean that those wintry hazards and impacts could be exacerbated from what they would normally be if we saw a colder wintry spell off the back of a very mild spell, for example, which we have seen in the past. And I've seen people say, oh, it's freezing outside, it's snowing heavily, but we're not seeing any settling, or it's slushy, or it's melting. And the reason for that is because we'd had mild air leading up to it, meaning ground temperatures, surface temperatures are not quite as cold as the upper air temperatures would lead you to think. Now, if you look at the next couple of charts, I don't want to take these too literally because they are precipitation charts for next week. We're going to look at the GM and the ECMWF, similar but slightly different in the way they do evolve. We're not looking at the GFS today because the GFS, I must say, is pretty wacky indeed. I'll show you the pressure charts for it because, again, it is good to compare and explain why it's going a bit wacky, but it is pretty much out of kilt from the other runs, which are showing much more cold dominance. The GFS is showing more milder dominance, heavier snow further north, but really bringing that milder event in very quickly by Wednesday next week in the south. Now, if you do run to around Sunday, where wintry showers starts back into the north, you can see widespread wintry showers arrive for Monday, but still reasonably dry further southwards. Into Tuesday, though, low pressure approaches from the southwest. More disturbances in the north, so it could be significant snowfall there, but further southwards, we start to see heavy precipitation bump into that very cold air. And as said, even if this was marginal, we could see significant impacts at the surface because the air is so cold down at ground level. But look through Tuesday afternoon, heavy snow packing in, and this would give us sort of similar outcome to what we saw from the GFS snow depths yesterday, where we saw 30, 40 centimetres of snow. This would be pretty ridiculous indeed. Next Tuesday would bury some areas, and eventually it does clear. Still cold air embedded around, and even at times, if we have a look at the upper air temperatures, actually milder upper air temperatures do push in, but the surface temperatures are still around freezing, and that is because of the cold lead up, where it has meant surface temperatures, ground temperatures are still going to remain cold, even if upper air temperatures temporarily go milder. If we do continue beyond that, more areas of winteriness spiral within this low, and we continue to see lots of precipitation. Does become more marginal because we do see that milder air wrapped in and around it a bit more and holding on a little bit more, so it could be a little bit more iffy later in the week from the GEM. But regardless, it is pretty cold indeed, very snowy, and ends the run with a bitterly cold northerly wind returning. As we'll see from the GEM precipitation charts, you'll see that this secondary northerly coming in later in the week on this run is not quite as sustained. It's more from a more mid-Atlantic ridge as the Greenland high does start to topple. So it probably wouldn't last more than a few more days, but regardless, it would be a very cold and snowy spell if this GEM run came off. Now, if you look at the ECMWF again, we can look at it a bit more zoomed out. You see the northerly wind arriving as we head through Saturday into Sunday, but the low pressure gathering to our south and starting to push in, and you can see heavy snow arriving for many as we head through Wednesday, and it does progress northwards but gives very heavy snow for many areas, and then eventually we see another snow area come in slightly further northwards. Again, that could happen, and it would mean there'll be more of a rain risk further southwards, but regardless, still heavy snow. And you just shove this 50 or 100 miles further southwards and eastwards, we would all remain in the bitterly cold air. You can see the bitterly cold air here, very mild air feeding into it, which could mean that yes, some areas might see rain, but on that boundary between sleet, rain and snow, it would be, we would see some incredibly high precipitation rates, which would involve snow to the northern edge. We could be absolutely buried again. Look at the snow depths, again, very similar to the run yesterday from the GFS, similar to the GEM in fact. Heavy snow across much of central England. Again, if we actually zoom in further, again, you're looking at 20 to 30 centimetres to the north of London across South Wales. If we actually do compare to the GEM run here, again, not quite as much, but again, looking at 5 to 10 centimetres quite widely, and again, could bury some areas. So again, I wouldn't take these charts too literally, but it just shows you some of the current model output. It is going for some incredibly snowy weather next week, some widespread snow we haven't seen in many years, so we will just have to keep a very close eye on this, but it is continuing to look incredibly interesting as we head into next week. Now, of course, if we do show you the pressure charts to see how this comes about, and of course prospects beyond the next sort of 5 to 7 days, where there still is uncertainty, but it is looking increasingly cold and wintry. Now, the GFS is very similar to all the other runs when it builds the high pressure up towards Greenland and then does progress into a northerly wind. But look what happens to the north of Greenland. We see low pressure develop over, and it breaks apart the high pressure system. It is very subtle, but it's a big difference to what the ECMWF and the GEM go for, and it means the northerly wind gets in but gets comfortably pushed away, and you see those darker blues return across Greenland as the block is squeezed away, and we go into a westerly flow. No signs of sustained cold there, potentially building another block later on, and again there is repeated signals for that as we progress through the end of Jan into early February, but for the next sort of week to 10 days, the GFS completely backing off a sustained cold spell. It would, of course, be wintry for a day or two, widely, but milder air moving back in by Tuesday, Wednesday, snowy in the north, but really only confined to Scotland. So a big difference from the GFS. Again, it could happen, but it's not what the majority of runs are going for at this stage. If I show you the GEM, again, a bit of a spoiler there, 180 hours. High pressure building up towards Greenland. Northerly winds come in, but look at what happens over Greenland. No low pressure system develops, and the high holds on. That's what the majority of runs are showing at this stage. So it shows it is a fundamental difference in how the block develops. It's not got nothing to do with the low pressure developing more to the south or the jet stream. It's all to do with that block not being anywhere near as strong and low pressure developing over Greenland. And that's the discrepancy between the GFS, the GEM and the ECMWF at this stage. The northern wind comes in from the GEM, and then low pressure develops within that very cold air, and it stays very cold and snowy. As I said, at day 10, it is still a northerly wind. Basically, the Atlantic is ready to push back in. So it might not last much longer than a couple of more days beyond this, but it would still be an incredibly cold and snowy 5 to 7 day spell here. If we compare to the ECMWF, this is the midnight run. The midday run hasn't fully updated as I'm recording this, unfortunately. You might have actually updated out to 168 hours, so we'll quickly have a look at that in a minute if it has updated. But you can see the high pressure heads towards Greenland, northerly winds, that high pressure holds on completely, and it goes very cold and wintry and very similar to the GM, just slightly different positioning of the low pressure, and that will mean the positioning of the precipitation and the rain snow line could be slightly different. Again, we've got to watch for the block. The block is holding on here completely, but if it does go a little bit further northwards and westwards, it would become a west-based NAO, negative NAO, sorry, and it would allow low pressure to barge in off the Atlantic. Could go snowy for a time, but probably would go milder with very little holding this cold air flooding in from the north. Now, if we do just quickly update and have a look at the midday, yes, we can get out to 168 hours, and you can see there are 168 hours, northerly winds coming in and colliding with milder air across the south, and it looks like a typical slider pattern where we see these lows slide through Europe coming up against this very strong northerly wind. Unfortunately, we've not got all the attributes and different charts available yet, but if we were, I'd be very interested to see the 300 HPA winds here to see where the general jet stream direction is, because from the looks of this, it would be far south, taking these lows straight into France, sliding along the colder air and potentially producing heavy snow somewhere. Just want to compare, of course, to the icon as well, out towards 180 hours. Again, continuing the high pressure up towards Greenland. So GFS is completely different to this. Cold air consuming all, and the lows are even actually further southwards here at 188 hours. So probably would be less snowy, but would have a much lower risk of any milder air moving in at all. Still would see plenty of showers, just no persistent snow further southwards. So it would be widely very cold in this scenario, but nowhere near as much widespread snow. And then, of course, if you have a look at the UK Met Office run, again, at 168 hours, direct northerlies pushing in. And the lows to our south have no real strength at all. It looks actually like we're going to see the high pressure build back northwards again and really hold on. So we can see there is a lot of discrepancy between the runs that are going cold, but they all are in agreement that it is going to be very cold for 2-3 days next week before lows even attempt to push in, whereas the GFS pushes the lows in almost immediately and successfully, indicating that there could be a little bit of an issue with the GFS at the moment. Again, I won't discount it, but it is looking like a little bit of a wacky run at the moment. Now, we'll show you the MOGREPs here, which are the Met Office Ensemble members. This is over at the Weather Outlook. And I don't normally show them because they only go out to sort of 7 or 8 days. So normally when we're looking at ensemble forecasts, it is very useful for the sort of the 7, 10, 15 day time frame, which the MOGREPs only just touch. So I don't normally look at them because they generally don't have too much spread and are in agreement with what the UKV shows, for example. But I do want to show it because we still have uncertainty in as soon as sort of 6, 7, 8 days' time, or quite significant uncertainty. But this just shows you that the majority of the UK Met Office ensembles, which will definitely significantly feed into the Met Office forecasts and their warnings as well, or their preparation for warnings, sorry, the warnings probably would be based more off the UKV high res. You can see, though, it is a big drop down in around 5 or 6 days' time, and this is London, of course, and it is very cold. You can see maybe 2 or 3 runs go a lot milder. Those would be similar to the GFS, but again, they're doing it even more delayed, so they're holding on to the cold air for 2 or 3 days and then going milder, whereas the GFS almost does it on the 15th, 16th. So similar, bringing the low pressure in and the milder air in, but doing it later. So it does give you a very good indication that GFS is a little bit wacky and out of sorts today. Just want to show you towards Edinburgh, if we just plot this. Again, if we have a look at this, no issues with the milder air pushing in. Yes, could be some briefly milder air on a couple of these ensemble members, but not getting much above 0, so still would be cold enough for snow. And yeah, looking bitterly cold here into next week. So no issues if you are in the north. Now, just to finish, if we look at the normal operational, the GFS and the ECMWF ensembles, the midday ensembles from the GFS, you can see the majority do go cold, and then you see the operational run with some of its other ensemble members do go very mild. Now, not all ensemble members go mild, but definitely is about a third of them do. The majority, though, still remain fairly cold, and that's where I do generally see the outcome going. GFS just perhaps taking a little bit longer to get there. Humidity temperatures are all over the place next week. The majority have us low single digits, if not towards freezing. You see the operational gets us towards 10 degrees there after a couple of days, again, because it's bringing that milder air in. And you can see there are some significant snow spikes. Again, we'll look at these in a little bit more detail in a couple of days' time when we do have a little bit more agreement from the models. Finish by having a look at the ECMWF ensembles from the midnight run. Again, a lot more agreement that it's going to remain cold. Yes, we have a few spiking, but the majority only spike to around 0. A few get up towards 5, but because of the intensity of cold at the surface, even 0 degree upper air temperatures, as long as it just stayed below freezing, would still bring us snowfall or perhaps even freezing rain. So ECMWF a lot stronger in terms of its cold signal, or a sustained colder signal. Yes, still some milder runs, but overall staying very cold and potentially very wintry as we head into next week. So things are continuing to look very interesting, and it is looking like we could see some winter wonderland situation next week. Of course, I'll keep you updated with what's going on. Lots of uncertainty at this stage, so I wouldn't take any single chart too literally, but I try to show you the range of outcomes we're seeing at this stage. From what anyone says, though, it is looking pretty cold indeed next week, and it is looking potentially very snowy as well. Have to keep a very close eye on it as things can change, but I don't see any huge issues at this stage other than if the GFS is even slightly correct, then we could see some issues with milder air in the south, but other than that, it is looking like a proper cold and wintry spell is coming for most, if not all, as we head into next week. So as I said, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.